But I found that metabolic health brought me back to health, not only back, but like way beyond anything that I could have ever hoped for in the past. And I realized that, yes, I love emergency medicine, but 85% of what I treat is chronic conditions that can be avoided. And I treat them very end stage, unfortunately. And sure, I mean, people get stabbed, people get shot, people have babies. Sure, those things are pretty run-of-the-mill emergency medicine, but a lot of my night is your diabetes is out of control, your hypertension's out of control. And so looking at how I can keep those patients out of my ER, not because they're not legitimate patients, they of course are, but they shouldn't be there. They should have had their problem dealt with well before they came in.
Welcome to The Ownership Game with Gary Montalvo. What would it take to get into the driver's seat of your life and leave your mark? The Ownership Game starts now.
Today we're talking about a different type of leadership and ownership. One that often gets overlooked, and that's the ownership of your health. Now, I know that's not necessarily what you signed up for with this podcast, but here's the thing. It doesn't matter how successful and amazing your business and your life are. If your body isn't functioning the way that it's designed to, you're just going to be playing the game with a major handicap. So today, we're going to go there. And I have the perfect guest for that. My guest today is Dr. Amy Gutman. After years as an emergency physician working in critical care, Amy thought that she understood health better than most. But when she got seriously ill herself and traditional medicine had no answers for her, she was forced to re-examine everything she thought she knew. What she discovered about metabolic health didn't just save her life, it gave her a whole new mission. And that's helping people to rebuild their health from the inside out. This episode is a deep dive into the lies that we've been sold about what's normal when it comes to aging, health, and disease. By the end, you're going to seriously question what you think you know. You're going to take back ownership of your body, and you're going to realize that better health and a better life, it's possible, no matter where you're starting from. So let's get into it. So Amy, thank you for being on the show. You literally just got off the emergency room working an overnight.
Yes. Good morning or good night, as it were.
Yeah, whichever way is up. So thank you so much for making the time, and I know how busy you are. I think we should start by just, how do you explain what you do? Because I mean, I know you're a doctor, obviously, you're a physician, but I think I'm curious to see how you describe what you do, because the breadth of your work is wide. It's broad.
It is definitely broad. I am a broad. I think that's actually a really good description. A very 1940s gangster movie. I'm sort of like that kind of broad. It is. I have a very weird and full and wonderful life. I'm an emergency physician, and I work only night shifts. I've done that for a very, very long time after I left kind of executive life in the emergency department. And there's all these random fellowships in critical care, and I've worked in helicopters and in ships in different countries because I really like seeing how the world treats patients. I like fixing people. And then a number of years ago, I got very, very sick, and I couldn't fix myself, knowing what I knew in traditional medicine, what I'd been practicing for decades. And as I got sicker and sicker, I stopped kind of listening to what I thought was traditional medicine, which had really served me well. And I said, well, if this doesn't work, how can I fix myself? And I stumbled upon some really interesting things about metabolic health. And I think it's definitely more welcome now in the past year than it has been previously, people that sort of woo-woo medicine. And trust me, I'm not a tree hugger. I'm very science-based. I did research for many years, but I found that metabolic health brought me to back to health, not only back, but like way beyond anything that I could have ever hoped for in the past. And I realized that, yes, I love emergency medicine, but I treat 85% of what I treat is chronic conditions that can be avoided. And I treat them very end stage, unfortunately. And
Mm-hmm.
sure, I mean, this sounds random, but people get stabbed, people get shot, people have babies. Sure, those things are pretty run of the mill emergency medicine, but a lot of my night is your diabetes is out of control, your hypertension's out of
Mm-hmm.
control. And so looking at how I can keep those patients out of my ER, not because they're not legitimate patients, they of course are, but they shouldn't be there.
Mm-hmm.
They should have had their problem dealt with well before they came in. And coincidentally, at the time, I was asked to give a random speech about leadership and literally a day prep. I'm like, well, okay, sure, I was in leadership, I was an executive, and I wonder if I could take what I know about the emergency department and critical care and leadership, but use science to kind of explain it. I looked at who else was talking at this conference, and I'm like, oh, let me try this. And it was an absolute hit because it was a very different way of talking about being a leadership through resilience, wellness principles, but again, not tree hugging. I'm like, I wonder if I can maybe fix people looking at it a different way. And so now I spend a lot of time not just doing more sort of functional medicine. Essentially, I use science to support people's success in whatever they do, physical and mental wellness, but making that sort of toughness science-based, but applicable.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes biochemistry sexy, essentially. So that's a bit of a nutshell, but that's what I do. And then I nap every now and again, as we talked about a little bit. I nap.
You this sorry, I'm trying to figure out there's like a
I'm
lot of different
crazy,
ways that
right?
I
It's a
no no
little,
no you just shared a lot of great things that I want to talk about. But you said metabolic health. I just want
yes,
to break that down for people a little
sure,
bit who may not understand what that means
of course.
and can you go into that a little bit?
Sure. So I think, again, especially in the United States, and I know your show is international, there's been a lot of focus recently on ultra processed foods, things of that sort. So the signs of metabolic health, some people call it the metabolic mindset, people who study specifically neuro health, but metabolic health essentially is treating the body as if we have this like kind of almost a clean slate metabolically, eating as if we were eating the way ancestrally, evolutionarily. No processed foods, no artificial sweeteners, raw whole foods if possible, and really avoiding excessive carbohydrates and glucose. Those are very toxic to our bodies. They destroy the gut biome. And the
Mm-hmm.
gut, you've heard of the gut brain connection, right? These are the things that keep us well, keep us healthy. And it all comes down to the mitochondria, the sexiest organelle in the body. So let me ask you, do you remember fifth grade biology at all?
Uh, yeah, actually, it
Yes.
was actually my
What do you
favorite class.
remember about the mitochondria? What's the one thing that everybody knows about the mitochondria? I'm going to put you on the spot.
Well, that I actually don't know that I know what that is.
So the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. And people are like, oh yeah, I do remember that. All right, fifth grade
Yeah.
biology. Um, and if the mitochondria is essentially what powers every cell in your body.
Mm-hmm.
And if you feed the mitochondria properly, if you give it everything it needs, it does miraculous things. It helps rid the body of the cells that are damaged and diseased. So damaged and diseased cells, when they replicate, when they make other cells, form abnormal cells, things like cancer-causing cells. Mitochondria that are healthy help fuel the brain so the brain works better. Mitochondria who are healthy help reduce heart disease. They make your organs function better. They make your pancreas function better. If you don't feed your mitochondria well, and again, that comes back to low sugar, low carbohydrate, these metabolically healthy, the mitochondria essentially form a metabolism. They make our metabolism healthy. If you don't feed a mitochondria well, not only does your physical health deteriorate, but your mental health deteriorates as well. So the metabolic mindset is feeding your body properly to make you work better on a cellular level, which is essentially a microcosm for the individual. But people extend it even further until looking at society that way as well. A physically healthy society tends to be a more productive society, a happier society. And so it's a whole sort of field of medicine that is very exciting, and it has saved thousands of lives just by returning to kind of a normal evolutionary way of eating.
Mhm. I love this. So just, to recap for the listeners, we we're we're putting you're essentially trying to help people from the inside out, right?
Yes.
The normal way of doing things is we eat all this stuff that it's really normal in our everyday lives,
Mm-hmm.
completely accessible
Mm-hmm.
everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely toxic for us,
Mm-hmm.
and really bad.
Yep.
Over time, this has an impact on our body, and it develops into all kinds of nasty little diseases, some of them neurological, by the way, as we're
Yes.
speaking.
Yes.
So your stress, your anxiety, your depression, your
Mm-hmm.
all those little things that now that are pretty prevalent, right? It's impacted by the stuff you're putting into your body. And so the way we normally treat this is I mean, literally the first time you walk in, and the most common thing, you walk into an office, they hand you a pill.
100%.
They hand you a pill. It's the easiest solution. It's the probably the most lucrative for the system.
Mm-hmm.
And so and then you are really trying to come at it from, okay, let's stop giving people pills. Let's stop, let me stop treating them at the end of this. Let me try to help them at the beginning of the process. I love this. It makes sense to me. But here's the thing, Amy, that anytime I have a conversation like this, I immediately get like overwhelmed
Okay.
because it's just really, it feels impossible
But it's
to
not.
I get it, but I want to voice this because I think a lot of
Sure.
listeners are going to kind of get what I'm talking about.
Of
It
course.
feels like, I mean, it's everywhere. It's
Oh,
everywhere. And,
absolutely.
and 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 these things that are labeled as like, oh, healthy, oh, low
Not,
fat,
not.
oh, the branding and the packaging. And there are things that you think you're eating that are like, oh, this is actually good. And then you absolutely find out that it's absolute trash. It's really difficult to navigate the misinformation, and it's overwhelming, I find sometimes. And the one thing that I think I really get overwhelmed by is that
Mm-hmm.
it seems that in order for me to do this, I have to like create a bubble and like
Okay. No,
like
no, I
I
understand what
have
you're
to like create
saying.
a bubble
Yeah.
and not like interact with the world in some ways, because it's just everywhere coming at you. So I know I'm saying that so that you can help us, because I
No.
know that this
Yep.
is a lot of people feel this way.
And you know what? So did I. And
Mm,
I so I would say probably about 9 out of every 10 patients that I try to talk to in the emergency department. Now, keep in mind, it's an emergency department, so it's not like I'm going to be sitting down for 30 minutes
yeah,
and talk with you, right?
yeah,
I would say about 9 out of 10 say exactly the same thing. And they
yeah.
say, oh, I can't. What you're telling me, I can't do it. And I always tell people it's simple, but it is not easy. But here's the thing. When we talk about things like drug de-escalation, right? Okay, I go to doctor is like, oh, your blood pressure's up, your cholesterol's up. I'm going to take, here's this pill, and let's do some labs. I'll see you in 6 months, and I'll put you on more pills. Cool. Well, it doesn't fix the problem, as you mentioned. So the easiest way to think about it is, I always tell people, very simple rules. If you cannot pronounce it, don't eat it. It's a good way to start, right? You can't pronounce it, don't eat it. If it's artificial, don't eat it. Because remember, you're putting something like super processed into your body.
You're talking about the labels, not the actual food. It's the you got to read the labels, and
you
if
gotta
you can't pronounce the labels,
you can't pronounce the label. Oh yeah, the food. There are a lot of foods out there. I will happily admit that I cannot pronounce.
Pop-Tarts. I can pronounce Pop-Tarts really well.
Yes, that is correct. Flip the box over, and if you can't read the ingredients, and I would actually say if it has more than 5 ingredients, you probably shouldn't be eating it anyway. Processed things are bad for you. If it comes in a bag and the bag says the expiration date is over 6 months, that whatever they're putting in it to keep it. But let me make it even simpler, because people are like, oh my gosh, this is like, how am I going to have this like low fat diet? Well, I will even tell you that the things that you know or you think you know, and I was where you were about 1.5 years ago. I was a vegan for 37 years. Oh, wow. 37 years. And I did it because I'm like, this is the healthiest thing for my body. It is the healthiest thing for the planet. It is the healthiest things for animals. Wrong, wrong, wrong. And that is because there are a lot of unfortunate lies built into our research system. So I'm going to tell you one fact, which is it was explained to me this way. It blows my mind. It blows everyone's mind I talk to. I'm going to get ready to change your mindset with one simple fact. Okay. So what do you know about cholesterol? Do you think cholesterol is like good or bad? What do you think?
So I know that I know a little bit about this. So
yes,
the idea is cholesterol is bad.
Right.
And it's like a killer.
Okay.
But you actually need cholesterol.
Yes.
Because it's cholesterol. I think cholesterol is key for your brain function, as I understand it.
So you already know about 90% more the truth than most people, because most people are like, oh, cholesterol is bad. My cholesterol is super high and it's bad. And I would say absolutely not, because so do you think that every woman who's breastfeeding their child wants to kill their child?
Absolutely not.
No, right? Okay, it's the greatest gift that you can give. Well, what's breast milk made of? What's a large component of it? It's fat and cholesterol. Why? Because the difference between an animal cell and a plant cell is a cholesterol wall. Animal cells all have cholesterol. That is what makes every cell in our body is made of cholesterol. Every neuron, every nerve in our body is coated with something called the myelin sheath, which is cholesterol. You take away the cholesterol, the nerves don't function well. And the studies that showed, like LDL is awful, it's the cause of heart disease, have been shown very clearly to be falsified by the companies that make statins. And so it's very interesting that the rise of dementia in this country skyrocketed about 2 years after statins, which are anti-cholesterol medications, were introduced as a medicine to lower something that really doesn't kill you and is not tied to heart disease. LDL is not. That myth has been repeated over and over, and the original study that it was based on was fraudulently done, and it was essentially bought and paid for by companies that were responsible for hypertension medications, heart disease medications, and LDL. Statins, because they strip the body's ability to make the nerves heal themselves, essentially started the dementia, it's like chronic disease pandemic in the world. It was essentially unknown before statins. If you take a patient off of a statin, a patient with Alzheimer's or a neurodegenerative disease, guess what? They get rapidly better. demonstrably so. They do testing. They have Alzheimer's, different types of testing. And if you take them off statins and let their nerves actually heal and start working again, guess what? They get better. Patients with neurodegenerative diseases who are put on a high-fat, low-carbohydrate, whole food diet heal. And when I talk about, like, when I was sick and I was desperately looking for help, I stumbled upon a woman. Her name is Dr. Terry Wahls, Wahls. Years ago, she developed something called the Wahls Protocol. She had a very fast progressing form of MS, multiple sclerosis. She went from being a professor of internal medicine to being essentially in an electric wheelchair in a very short period of time, and was enrolled at a study in her institution where we were looking at this diet. And there's these incredible pictures out there of her, like, I think, and I apologize if I get the dates wrong, but it was October, I think, 2007 to October 2008. Picture of her in an electric wheelchair, like facing life like on a ventilator in a feeding tube, from my understanding, to riding a bicycle, just with the intervention of a high-fat diet, a ketogenic-based diet, because it healed her. Now, not completely. She had had some damage, but it's interesting. If you take toxins out of your system, your diabetes goes away. Your hypertension goes away. You don't become a skinny mini. I am not a skinny mini. I laugh. Everyone on ketogenic diet and carnivore, like, they're like, I have a size too. I'm a size 0. I'm like, I've actually gained weight, which that's my body telling me this is where I need to be. But for everyone who says it's overwhelming, I can't do it, you absolutely can. It's a matter of, you get a lot of disinformation, but if you think simply, if it is something that I have to buy in a bag that's processed, it's probably not going to be good for me. If it's something that it's not like a single ingredient food, it's probably not good for me. I hear from patients, I can't afford it. It's like, I can't afford regenerative, free range. Absolutely.
That's real.
100%. I grew up in Detroit. It is a food, like, there's nothing. You cannot, it's not like you're going to have a Whole Foods like in the middle of Detroit. And if you did, it's probably you can't afford it, because the food there, like, I look at a pound of beef there and I'm like, dear God, no. But the worst ground beef is better than the best processed sludge that you're going to get. And you tend to eat a lot less, because whole foods full of fat and full of protein are very satiating. They fill you up. You don't want to eat more. There are studies that have been shown over and over again that you just feel fuller on less. Mm-hmm. And so you don't snack as much. And guess what? Maybe you're not paying $1,000 a month for medication anymore. And that goes into helping you fill your diet.
Yeah.
If you're not eating crud, you can afford those whole foods that, thank God, egg prices have gone down, because, listen, I've got a dealer at the farmer's market, and she gets me the really good deals, but it's like, she's my dealer. But these are things that are expensive. That's
what we have come to now. We have to go to our dealers for eggs.
Got a dealer. I have a dealer. She gets the good stuff under the table. But yeah, the reality is, good whole food is more expensive than cheap crap. Of course it is. That's part of the marketing genius of it. Let me ask you another question. Do you know where the whole idea of these very addicting processed foods, where the whole marketing and production of them, do you know where it came from? Do you know the history of it?
I do, actually. I know a little bit about it.
Please.
So
I'm so excited, by the way.
my chiropractor, who I see all the time, he teaches me all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding of it is when the government started tracking down on cigarette companies.
Yes.
They started expanding their portfolio and they started to get into foods.
Yes.
And so what they brought their same thinking. They said, well, how do we make these foods more addicting? And so this was happening all around like the 80s, I believe, and
Mm-hmm.
late 90s around that
Mm-hmm.
time. And so they started to really mess with the food
Yep.
and figure out how to add things that would make you, how do we make this chip be more addicting so that you can't just grab one,
You
right? And
can't
so
eat
they,
just one. What
yeah,
was that? Lay's? That's Lay's.
I think so.
Maybe.
And so, and I actually listened to the New York Times did a story on
Mm-hmm.
this very recently because what the story was about is that now that Ozempic and all these other drugs are in the market to help people lose weight, they don't just help you lose weight, they actually change the things that you want to eat.
Yep.
And so now they have these guys at work at trying to figure out how to make food more addicting
Yep.
for people that are on Ozempic.
100%. And here's the kicker. So the GLP-1, that's what these Ozempic and Wegovy and they call them semaglutide medication. So it's one of we talk about satiety. So I said these good foods, high fat, high protein, high quality foods make you fuller quicker. Well, guess what? They've actually done head-to-head studies with the like Ozempic type medications, semaglutides versus a keto diet. The keto diet actually suppresses that molecule better,
Mm.
better than Ozempic. But people like a shot. People like a pill. Is your diabetes under control? Or I hear all the time, well, if I want like a extra bowl of chips or rice, I just dial up my insulin. It's fine. My sugar's controlled. Because people would rather do that because to them that's easy. In the moment, it's easy. And so I'm so excited that you know about that history because I think again recently people are learning these things. It's not a conspiracy theory. They are making foods more addictive. They call it hyper palatable. Things that
Mm-hmm.
a bag of chips is like, what, 10 servings in it? And you're like, what is the serving size? Good God, is it 4 chips? No. But they want you to eat a whole bag. You can't eat just one. And they've used those same tricks. And what's fascinating is, it's like baby food in the US is sweetened about, and I apologize for if I'm fudging the percentages, but about 3 to 4% more sugar per serving than baby food in other countries because they're training us, even as a baby. Like, first of all, why is there sugar in there? Why are there seed oils? And it's the most awful, nasty. And there are wonderful alternatives for women who can't breastfeed. There are, because not every woman could. I couldn't for a long time. I was ill, but there's sugar in it. Because if a baby learns to crave sugar, it changes their brain chemistry. And then they want sugar. And then it's very hard to break you of that because now you have to break essentially
Mm-hmm.
training from childhood on. And so the other interesting thing is the companies like Nestle, for example, makes the foods that make you diabetic. They make the medical products that treat diabetes, and they make some of the medications that are for patients who have hypertension, diabetes, and kidney failure. So
Are you kidding me right
I
now?
I am not. In fact, I
did not
will.
know that.
Oh my goodness. I will send you a couple of really interesting graphics. So there's only about 20 or so main food companies in the entire world, probably a little bit less than that. And they're worldwide. And like the people for Nestle make like the nutritional shakes for people who have diabetes. The people from Nestle make the nutritional shakes for people from diabetes. It just sounds wrong, right? When you say it out loud.
Yeah.
And it's because they have their hands in all sorts of different things. And that's what, I mean, that's what corporate business does. They're
Yeah.
out to make a profit, but unfortunately, they're making a profit based upon our health being terrible. Um, they also are a huge sponsor of the American Heart Association, the American Diabetes Association, where they have been cited very recently. It's been very much in the media and global media because a lot of the researchers who their studies are like recently, the American Academy of Pediatrics came out and said a low carbohydrate diet for children is potentially bad because it impacts their growth. Well, the study was funded by corporate food conglomerates who gave grants for them to study. Well, I have to tell you, if you're a researcher, you're supposed to report your bias, of course. But if you're being paid by a company that essentially makes sugary substances or sells medications to treat sugary substances, and you're giving a huge grant to study, ooh, are sugary substances bad? That takes a very strong person to go, yeah, they are, because first of all, it's not going to get published, and second of all, your money's going to get pulled. It doesn't mean researchers are bad people. It just means that it's very difficult to do unbiased research without already knowing the end result, and you make your data make that end result. And so you get very confusing information in the media, which is why a lot of people think that they're overwhelmed by it. They're not overwhelmed by it. It's simple. They're overwhelmed by the misinformation that they hear.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how many people have I told you that putting you on a statin is bad because cholesterol is good for you? They will look at you and go, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right?
And this is this, what comes to mind is the low fat craze, it's like all the food became low fat, and so now that's the thing, that's the standard. But what they don't tell you in the background is that in order to make it palatable, they're hyping it up with sugar. So you're getting
100%.
low fat, but you're getting really high sugar content. And it's but that's, I think the part that's overwhelming, and maybe you can speak to this, is like it feels like you have to have a medical degree to go through all of this, because now what I feel I have to do is I have to now go through studies and try to find the in it and try to
So there's
find.
in everything. So let's just, am I allowed to swear?
I did. We typically don't, but I just
Are we gonna
dropped one,
bleep? Are we
which
gonna
I
bleep?
don't know.
Okay.
So
It's a very mild one. Again, I'm a night shift. I was an EMT firefighter for many years. My vocabulary is colorful.
No.
So let me just say this. I was a physician for almost 2 decades and believed the BS.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be a physician, because most physicians, I don't think physicians are bad people. I don't
No.
think as a profession we are. I think that we believe what we think we know. And I say sometimes to audiences when they ask me, well, why do you do this? Because it's very unpopular. It's certainly not popular among a lot of my bosses, I will say. My peers think it's really interesting. My job every day is like converting one of my nurses or one of my people I work with. I'm converting you to keto, I promise you. And I throw facts, and I'm like, I think some of them just stop eating carbs just because they're tired of hearing me rant. But I think having an open mind and just questioning things. So like recently, the American Diabetes Association put out a recipe and said, this is great for you. It's healthy for your kidneys. It's healthy for sugar. It was a pasta dish made with soy sauce. So it's pasta. So it's processed carbohydrates drenched in a salty processed food. So diabetes causes hypertension, heart disease, and kidney failure. So I don't know that having a very high starchy carbohydrate load covered in salt is necessarily the best advice. But who was that recipe sponsored by? It was sponsored by DaVita. It actually said it on there. DaVita is the #1 company that provides dialysis in the United States. So it's sort of like your corner marijuana dealer going, you're going to feel so good with this. You better try it. Well, yeah, there's consequences. So this is what I would say to the everyday person who's overwhelmed and just is like, I give up. I'm just going to take my drugs and just hope that everything is good. You should question everything. And that's what we do in science. We should question everything. As a human, we question everything. What does every 2-year-old say that you kind of like, why? We should do that as adults as well. If you're at a grocery store and you're in an aisle and you see a food that says heart healthy, and you flip it over and you're looking at like a granola bar, which are nothing but candy, right? So you look at the back, cane sugar, corn syrup, starch, and you look through this and you look at this, it's like, this is not food. This is like a conglomeration of nastiness all junked together in a bar. You might see honey, but the honey they're using in a commercial granola bar is not honey like you're going to a farm. It's mostly glucose. So you're looking at the back of that as heart healthy. How is this heart healthy? There's nothing heart healthy about that. And so you have to go, well, this doesn't make any sense to me. Sure, common sense says it doesn't make any sense. Put it back and say, well, what should I have as a snack? You want chocolate? Great. Have some dark chocolate. It is super heart healthy. It's got to be a good quality, but it's got some wonderful antioxidants in it. It's a wonderful snack. It is minimally processed depending on where you get it. We're not talking a Hershey's bar. Hershey's bar is not to have the, not like I'm ever going to be sponsored by Hershey's, granted, but whatever. But dark chocolate's good for the heart. It's good for the health. Great. You can literally, you have, your phone, you have the access to everything in the world here. And it's just a matter of, is your source good, or trust your gut? Does it make sense? If somebody is selling you the idea that something out of a box is healthier from you than something from a farm, it's not correct. It is absolutely not correct. If you're reading a bag of chips that says you can't eat just one, well, why not? Shouldn't we be able to stop? If you eat a food and feel hungry after you eat something, where was the nutritional value? Our bodies evolutionarily, when we eat, say, I'm full. I have killed the wildebeest, or whatever beast it was. I'm full. I have filled what I need. I can go off and make more babies, or whatever people did when there wasn't any cable TV to watch, and everybody's happy. And then when you have that really healthy body and that really healthy mind, you can do those things because you're clear of those addictions. Because, to be honest, these are addictions. Mm-hmm. And you and I both know, whether you're a scientist or not a scientist, that anyone with any addiction is not living their life to their fullest. And I know people want to. So if I can make that science accessible to them, that makes me happy.
Yeah, and I think you're saying something really interesting, because in part of my experience is that I don't think people realize that it can be better, because that they can feel better, because in my experience, it's like we get so used to living with these aches and pains and indigestion, and we just go, oh, that's just how I am, or that's just normal, or we start taking more medicine or more things to try to manage that symptom. And we very much get used to living in a state of suffering, if you will, in some way, shape, or form. And it I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's just we think that that's what it is, or it just seems too hard or overwhelming or something. But you kind of have to step into a space of like, this isn't normal, you know?
Do you think there's been a point in your life that if you've ever seen a doctor or your chiropractor, someone say, "Oh, you feel this way because of your age"? Have you ever been told that?
All the freaking, like literally,
And I have to
all
tell you, I don't know what age you are. You have
I
beautiful skin, so I don't know
let's
what age you
talk.
are.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I'm 48.
Mazel tov. That's
Am
wonderful.
Yes, I just turned 48. My birthday was like 8 days ago. Thank you.
Oh, happy
Um,
birthday.
so I'm having to do my internal stuff, right? Got
Sure.
my colonoscopy,
Mm-hmm.
so I went to the urologist
Mm-hmm.
because
As one does.
yeah, and I'm starting to notice some change in the way that I'm
Mm-hmm.
urinating
Mm-hmm.
um, and literally he just said, "Oh yeah, that's typical when you're people your age." And I asked him, I said, "I've heard the exercises that I can do, and should I be doing it? I
Yeah.
don't really subscribe to that.
Yeah.
Let's give you this pill
Let's
to
give a
try and
pill.
see how
Yeah.
it goes." And I was like, he literally just didn't even. He just said you're 48 and shoved this pill in my mouth,
Yeah.
and
Time to dig your grave, apparently at 48.
and I
That's
was
that's
like,
it.
he was like, "Yep, that's typical." But you know, there's so many things I don't want to talk to. You're gonna have to come back.
Oh, it'd be lovely. Well, let me put this out to you. People who think it can't get better, the natural response to that is giving up hope. And so,
Mm-hmm.
sure, okay, I'll take another pill. I'll take this. I'll take a pill to fix the pill, the actions of that pill. And so you're an entrepreneur. You're very smart. You have all these things going for you. You're a very positive person. How did it affect you when you were told, "Oh, you're 48. It's just your age and just essentially suck it up"? How did that affect you, a very positive person?
Mm-hmm.
What was the effect on you? What
Well,
was your response?
the first thing I experienced was dismissed.
Right.
I don't really have a problem. That's just what it is
Right.
when you're your age, like tough,
Yeah.
right? And then I felt like there was a bit of hopelessness in that
Sure.
you're like, this is what my rest of my life is like now. I have to now live this way. There's really nothing I can do. There's really nothing that I can and I think the other thing that it does is that it reinforces this like authority dynamic. Like, I know more
It's
than you
interesting.
do.
Yep.
Like, don't question the system. Like, you just take your pill and you're like, "Oh, okay. I guess I'm just gonna go take
Thank
my pill
you.
and walk away,"
Just gonna pay my copay now. And
Right. Yeah, yeah. There was something like that, I think, that was in the background, which is interesting. So, you know, I mean, I have done maybe 7 episodes now at this point where the moral of the story in some way, shape, or form is you really have to advocate for yourself when you're in the
100%.
medical system.
In
Um,
any system, but especially the medical system, because now take somebody who's not you, who walks into the office and gets that
yeah.
news. And they're like, "Oh, all right, well, I guess this is it. I'll take these pills and I'll." It's quite depressing. It's when people who are 300 pounds and they smoke and they're diabetic and hypertension, they come to the emergency department, and for whatever critical illness has happened to them, they're like, "Well, I just give up. You're going to need dialysis. I give up. You're going to need to have your toes cut off. I give up." And they just accept the fact. Why would I quit smoking when, it's not going to get any better? Because they don't understand that it can. And it's completely in their control. Now, there are points where people just cannot reverse their disease completely, of course. There's nothing magical about what I do. I just sit people down and I'm like, "Listen, the whole idea, as we talk about resiliency, you have to be strong physically to be strong mentally. And I don't mean an 85-year-old who's out there, benching 150 pounds. I mean, you have to be giving your body the things it needs to function best. So I used to have horrible, horrible sciatica. I spent years as a very, very heavy, very obese firefighter. It hurt my back. And I would go sometimes weeks at a time, just literally dragging my leg. Injections, meds on top of meds, steroids on top of meds, just horrible things. Became very hard to function. I became a carnivore. I sort of attacked this ketogenic lifestyle, and it all went away in a kind of magical way because you decrease inflammation in your body. Last week, because I bent over, and it was one of the things I was bending over weirdly. I'm a very awkward person. I'm very clumsy. Bent over to tie my shoe, and I my back. And I'm like, oh, it's back. And went to work because I don't ever miss work. I was miserable for 12 hours, went home, pounded some exogenous ketones, like additional things. And I asked my husband to get my back rub. It was so dry. I hadn't used it in 16 months. And I woke up the next evening, pain's gone. And it's because, sure, I get aches and pains because I'm not 20 years old and I do have medical problems. I had hurt my back. But all those things that kept me in that state of pain, the inflammation, I'm just going to pound ibuprofen, which kills the gut. I'm going to, I don't feel well, so I'm just going to eat some pasta because, it hurts so bad. I just want to eat some comfort food. More inflammation, more sugar, more inflammation, more sugar. And now I'm not that person anymore. And I get up 12 hours after I hurt myself. I'm like, all right, maybe not 100%, but 12 hours, not 3 weeks. No injections. Put chiropractor out of business. I don't mean to put your chiropractor out of business. He sounds like a lovely person and he's definitely educating you. But people don't understand that life can get better. And it doesn't take an awful lot. And people are afraid to question people with those magical, very expensive letters after their name.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't. And I have those magical, expensive letters after my name. I did not question it.
Yeah.
And when I started, that's when my life changed. And I want that for every person I meet, every patient, every person like you. You're not my patient. You're a very cool guy who knows a lot more than the average person, but can still up their game. I can up my game. We can do that every day. As you say, it's ownership. You can be in charge of your physical and mental health, but it takes work. It is simple, but not easy. So let me issue this as a challenge.
Yeah.
Today, I want you to go in your fridge or your cupboards, whatever, and look at what you have there. And if you see something that you're looking at this and like, and it's processed or it's artificial or whatever, or it doesn't, what is the term, spark joy? It doesn't spark joy. I think that right? Wasn't that a thing 10 years ago?
It sparks joy. That's the problem.
But it sparks.
It comes
you
at a
think
price.
It sparks. You think it does. It gives you that little serotonin burst. But if you're looking at it and like, this is probably not good for me, and then take 24 hours and just eat whole foods. Enjoy yourself a nice hamburger, but don't have the bun. Don't have seed oils. Just have good, healthy foods, single ingredient foods, nothing artificial. Don't have soda. Have some bubbly water, which I was drinking 12 Diet Pepsis a night or Diet Cokes, whatever I can get my hands on, a night. And I'm like, I can't give this up. You bet I can. Because
that's the easiest thing. If anybody listening, that is probably the easiest thing that will have the biggest impact Give up those sodas and
Yep.
those sugary juices,
Yep.
and that
It's
right there
amazing.
will make such a difference.
Absolutely. And if you say, I can't do it, you can. It's just how much do you want it? How much is your health worth to you? And the answer should be everything. The
Yeah.
answer should be everything. And I hope that somebody listening to this goes, oh, you know what? Maybe today's the day that I'm going to just look at my fridge. And today is the day that I'm going to sit back and really question what I think I know. And there's nothing that irritates me more than somebody saying, oh, I know it's a podcast, you can't say, I'm making the air quotes, like, do your own research. Yeah, do your own research. It doesn't necessarily mean that all the research you're doing is good or valid, but be that 2-year-old. Ask
Yeah.
why? And if it doesn't make sense, ask more questions. And this goes back to the one question I wanted to ask you after listening to my year in review that you did in January. So you talked about winning and losing. So this kind of ties to my question I wanted to ask you. Do you think that not winning is actually losing?
No, not win. I mean, our biggest lessons in life come from not winning. That's our biggest teacher. Sometimes you win and you just keep winning. You actually are missing a lot of lessons
There
along
you
the
go.
way.
So take that
Um,
to what I'm challenging you to do. So maybe today you're like, you know what? I'm maybe not going to have that soda today. I'm not going to give up everything else. I'm maybe not going to have that soda. Cool. You still won. You won a little battle today. Cool. Did you win
mhm.
the war? No. But you won a battle. And maybe tomorrow, you're like, okay, instead of having these chips, I'm going to, what can I have instead of chips? What do I like instead of chips? Ooh, I'm going to have a nice piece of cheddar cheese. It's salty. It's wonderful. It's full of wonderful nutrients. Whole milk and wonderful. Cool. That's another win. And maybe the day after, instead of eating like a deep fried chicken sandwich, I'm going to have like a really, really good steak sandwich. But I'm only going to have one piece of bread. And I'm going to make sure it's sourdough from a local bakery because it's not made with crud. And chances are it's going to be a little bit healthier for me than anything I'm going to get from a store that can live on a shelf for 3 months. And when you do those baby steps, and then you get to the point where you're like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better. And then you're ready to make the leap and go, you know what? I'm going to take everything processed out of my life. And don't get me wrong, I'm not perfect. Good Lord. I bang my head on the wall all the time because I'm like, oh, I really want this. I love bread. Dear God, I love bread.
Brad.
Bread! And it's to this day, it makes me sick. And I still look at it and drool. Because my mind says, oh my gosh, just have one piece. It's not going to hurt you. And it will. It does. It does hurt. But I think people just think if they can't win it all, they're not going to
Yeah,
do it.
I think this conversation is so important. Um, because I do think that people often approach this as a all or nothing type of
Sure.
game, and and the moment they go off track, the moment they have a slip up, the judgment and beat up is so big that they
Yes.
now take themselves off the court and stop playing the game altogether,
Yes.
and then don't try for another 3 months. And I think they get caught up in this like sort of yo-yo. And I think what you're saying, the grace, the you know, and the grace that there's two things that you're really saying that I think are: one, something is better than nothing.
Yes.
You said something that I wanted to go back to, and I'm glad it's coming back up. The idea that the cheapest ground beef is better than the processed stuff.
Yes.
Just if we cannot afford Whole Foods,
Sure.
then do what you can. This idea of what are some small ways that you can, you can't afford organic
Mm-hmm.
broccoli, have broccoli
Have
still,
broccoli.
right? That's
Yeah.
still better. And I think that's so important,
Yes.
because when we approach this with perfectionism, with this idea that I have to do this right, it's hard to win that game. It's really
Yes.
difficult to win that game. And it's not realistic, and it's just unkind to you, and I think brutal. So I love that we're sort of wrapping up the conversation here with this grace and this idea that it's a practice,
Mm-hmm.
and like any practices, you're gonna have days where you're right on. You're gonna have
Yep.
days when you're gonna it's gonna be a struggle, and you're
Yep.
gonna have days where you slip up, and there's always something to learn from that, and you keep
And there's
applying it,
always a
right?
tomorrow.
Yeah.
There's always a tomorrow. If you do it right, today can be like, all right, you know what? Today is a day that maybe I didn't eat perfectly, but I ate better than the day before. Therefore, tomorrow's going to be even better. Tomorrow, my goal
Yeah.
is to do X, Y, and Z. And I think I love that concept of grace. I think it's a great way to sort of tie this up in that it, it's, I think but God give me the grace to accept serenity. And I
Mm-hmm.
apologize. I'm completely mangling that. But it is one of the things that you should not accept the fact that the way you are is the way you will be. You can have a life that's without pain. In your case, you can pee better. That's fine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
and it is one of the things that you have this in your control, but you have to have enough self-confidence and self-worth to believe you can do it. And I try to teach people that there is no one who is beyond helping with this. No one. I don't care if you're end stage whatever. You can always feel better. And if that's what I can do both in the emergency department and outside of the emergency department, then that makes me very happy. I can help an executive be better at what they do, but not just at work, but at home. I can meet interesting people like you. It's like, Gary, let's like clean out your fridge and let's make tomorrow a day that your back actually doesn't hurt as much. You feel better. Your next birthday, was 357 days or so from now, is going to be better than the one you had 8 days ago. I think those things are great, and that kind of drives me now.
Yeah.
And there we go. I think that's a very good way. Simple but not easy.
I love it. Do you this is we concluded. This is
Yes,
beautiful, but I have three things that I want to talk
of
to you about.
course.
Do you have time?
I do.
Okay, so I don't know if we're opening up a can of worms here, but
I love worms.
I so I'm so I try not to get political on the
Yes.
show in general, but I'm curious how your thoughts on Robert F. Kennedy and some of his ideas and some of the work that he's out. Like, are you excited? Are you cautious? Where are you with this?
Cautiously optimistic.
Okay.
So I don't. So one of the things that I like ideas, not necessarily people or like large scopes of people, because I think people, we tend to form clans, right? We
Mm-hmm.
either like, oh, this person is perfect and all of their ideas are perfect when they aren't.
Mm-hmm.
You sometimes agree with
Mm-hmm.
this person or don't. And I think like you think of like Elon Musk, like a person
Mm-hmm.
like that. There are people who he can do no wrong. There are people he can do no right. And there's some people like, well, some of it's right, some of it's wrong, some of it I agree with, some of it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think what I like best about his approach is he is very science based. Some of his science I don't know necessarily that I agree with, but it's interesting because he does tend to do a deep dive into the science, but sometimes the research isn't that great. I love the fact that he is bringing it to the forefront.
Mm-hmm.
I think the challenge with him particularly is he's very divisive as a person.
Yeah.
And so people who are like, I think his ideas about like, oh, unprocessed foods are great and looking into this, but I don't like what he says about vaccines. Okay, but he's been sometimes inconsistent on it, but his idea about vaccines are not that they're necessarily bad, but there's been no really good research into them. I think everyone would agree that the concept of vaccines is very good. It's life-saving. But it's true, and I say this as somebody who I'm fully vaccinated, my child's vaccinated. There's no long-term research and studies into them. And that's kind of horrifying to me as
Yeah.
a scientist. So I'm cautiously optimistic. Honestly, he's in his 70s and he's got abs, so I'm, I'm sort of impressed actually by that. But yeah, politics are always interesting though, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, it's, and the crazy thing about it is that this conversation shouldn't be political, really, what I'm
Absolutely not.
realizing. But I think to your point now, it has gotten political, and but he says some interesting things
Sure.
about, definitely the processed food industry and the pharmaceutical companies. There is some reckoning that needs to happen there.
Yep. He's brought it to the
So
forefront, but
yeah.
unfortunately, it comes with very heavy political overtones, which if you're on one side of the fence, you agree with it, you're on the other side, you don't. But I think people, that's a sort of a gut reaction. Oh, I'm on, left side or right side, so therefore I believe this.
Hmm.
Whereas people, you can cross all sides of the spectrum. There are people that I know who are very, very right wing, the people who are very left wing, people in the moderate. And it's very interesting because everyone's ideas are all over there. I don't base my friendships on your political views. I'm
Hmm.
respectful of your political. I think we should be able to talk to people about their political views. In fact, I had a very fascinating conversation with my book editor who has very, very opposite political leanings in a couple of things than I do. And I asked him if it made him uncomfortable. I don't talk politics in my book, but I asked him if it made him uncomfortable, and he said no, because I'm comfortable with you. Cool.
Hmm.
You shouldn't have the same ideas that I do. But I'm glad it's making you ask questions.
Hmm.
Um I think he's making a lot of people ask questions, which is great. I think people should.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And you have a book coming out, so you kind of
Yes.
just set it up. So the timing may work out with this
And
episode
if
is
it
actually
if it
around.
doesn't,
So
if it doesn't,
so
that's fine. I'm never going to get rich by making a book. It's just hoping to impart some interesting things onto people.
yeah, what can people expect from your book?
So it's called Powerhouse Living. So we talked about the mitochondria, right? The powerhouse of the cell. And it's taking the concepts that I learned from emergency medicine and critical care and then executive leadership, but breaking down the science of it. How can being a good emergency room physician make you a better person personally and professionally? And taking these sort of crazy life lessons that I've had and using it to apply to your life. Not a self-help book, but hey, leadership is, for example, not a position. So to us in the emergency department, for example, you always know who's running a resuscitation bike because they're physically at the head of the bed. We call it the head of bed. Everyone in that room, whether I'm at the head of the bed or not, knows I am running that code. Why? Because it's the way I carry myself. It's the way I do things. It's the way I control that room. How do I control that room? And there's a whole science behind it. And anyone can use those lessons to become a better leader, whether personally or professionally. So the book teaches you how to be a powerhouse, how to use your mitochondria to be better physically and better mentally. Be the best person you can be. It's
Exciting.
sexy, right?
Yeah,
Somebody
yeah.
called it. I did one of the first podcasts I did. He said it's keto sexy, and I'm like, wow, keto sexy. And unfortunately, the little podcast things where they do little like promo for the show. It
Uh-huh.
was this very Latina, very busty Abby, lots of long hair, lots of makeup, and I'm like, so you've seen me, right? Like, I
That
mean,
was the graph.
I'm like, I keep myself, I'm a woman in my 50s. I keep myself, I exercise and think, people are going to look at that and like, oh my gosh. I'm like, he's like, oh no, I make it clear that's nothing like you. I'm like, okay. He goes, it's called catfishing. We want people to listen to the podcast. And I'm like, you don't think this is enough? He goes, no. I'm like, all right. I'm not even offended by that.
Oh
That's
my
fine.
goodness. Amy, it's been such a pleasure. So what we'll do is we will when you launch the book, we will update the show notes
That'd
and
be
put the link of
lovely.
it in there. But it should be coming out in the next few months, so keep an
I'm
eye out for
very
that.
excited.
And lastly, I think so I think a lot of people are going to be inspired now to want to learn more and to try to get some resources for where to make better decisions about their food or some of the things that they're doing. Do you have any recommendations for people to get started? I mean, I know this like, it's like it could be a lot, but I
Sure.
think, if you have a book or a resource or some way that and obviously you're available to them because you have a private practice where you
Sure.
work with people as well, so they can reach out to you as well.
Yeah, there are so many resources out there, and there's a couple of people that I definitely recommend on, for example, YouTube, like highly accessible things for everybody. So there's a wonderful physician. His name is Ken Berry, Berry. He's an internal medicine doctor. He's very southern, very laid back, very accessible, and he breaks things down, really complicated things like for the metabolic health. There's a wonderful physician, psychiatrist from Harvard, two of them actually, Dr. Georgia Ede and Dr. Chris Palmer. Brilliant. They talk about the metabolic mind. Again, very accessible. Um, I think if people just, for example, go to YouTube or Twitter and things and like, oh, I'm curious about these things. It's like ketogenic diet, carnivore diet, low carb diet, or just start looking at processed foods. Like what is all the hoo-ha about processed foods? And there is so much good information out there that is made for everybody. There's a wonderful metabolic health coach, and I will be fully transparent. He's a dear friend of mine. His name is Martin Gillespie. He's on LinkedIn. He's got a podcast. It's called Metabolic Wellbeing Without the BS, and he's wonderful. He's a health coach. He became a health coach because he was dying of cancer and then fixed himself because he didn't want to give up.
Hmm.
Um, so there's so many wonderful resources out there. It's just a matter of picking up your phone, opening up the internet and going, okay, what can I do to be better? And, you know, it's an interesting thing that you've asked because I think what I will do, probably not this weekend because super busy, but in the next few weeks or so, certainly before the podcast comes out, I will make sure that I start adding a nice little section to my website about, hey, these are really great people to start, or where you can start, easy steps for that. And I think
Yeah.
that might be a nice addition for people.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful for people because, like I said, it's sometimes it can be overwhelming.
Yes.
Amy, I cannot tell you how much I've enjoyed this conversation.
You're fantastic.
You are fantastic. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.
Absolutely.
And we'll definitely have you back, okay?
I can't
I want
wait.
to continue. I was like, okay, how do I make this not a 2-hour episode?
No, I will absolutely. It would be an absolute honor, and I want to hear about how your challenge went, and then I will send you some of the information that I've talked about. But I want you to look in your fridge, and then tomorrow, make one change. How does that
You
sound?
got it. You
All
got it.
right, Gary, such a pleasure.
I, all right, my love. Have a great one. Thank you so
Have a
much.
good one to you too.
Bye-bye.
Wow, wow, wow. That is all I have to say. Wow. This conversation is just wild to me. The levels of misinformation are just astonishing. And I think misinformation is just too sanitized of a word. Really, what we're talking about are decades of lies and manipulation. So, wild. Okay, so here's where I want to start. The first thing I want to say is you're not crazy. This stuff, it's really difficult to navigate. At least for me it is. Food companies are spending billions to convince us that the products are healthy. Doctors are using data and training that has been manipulated. Food, it has been designed to be more and more addictive, and we are becoming more and more reliant on medication to pacify all of the side effects of that. It's extremely difficult to know which way is up, to know what's true and what isn't. It's enough to make anyone feel helpless. And like the only way to navigate this is to grow your own food and cook all your meals and pack your food wherever you go. And who the hell has time for all that? But here's the thing. There is hope. My biggest takeaway from this conversation has been, what's one step that you can take? What's one small choice that you can make every day? Taking ownership of our health isn't about perfection, it's about paying attention. It's about questioning what we've been taught and trusting our own bodies and taking small, consistent steps towards real vitality. Not because someone else told us to, but because we deserve to live fully, not just survive. So my challenge to you this week is, where have you gotten a little too comfortable when it comes to your health? Where have you accepted feeling tired or sluggish or unwell as just normal? And what's one small step that you could take this week to take back even a little more ownership over your health? Maybe it's questioning just one thing you've always assumed was healthy. Maybe it's getting curious about how a certain food or habit actually makes you feel. It doesn't have to be a massive overhaul, it just has to be a start. And I think it's important to remember that momentum isn't built by doing everything at once. It's built by doing one thing today, and then another tomorrow, and then another after that. That is our show for this week. If this conversation resonated with you or pissed you off, don't forget to hit follow or subscribe so that you can stay up to date when the new episodes drop. And it also does a great deal to help me grow the show, so I would really appreciate that. And of course, don't forget to share the episode with someone who might need to hear this crazy, crazy, crazy podcast episode. Until next time, my friends, keep leading yourself with compassion, keep questioning the noise, and keep playing the ownership game.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Ownership Game with your host, Gary Montalvo. Make sure to like and comment on your favorite podcast platform, as well as subscribe so that you never miss an episode.